Hello, and welcome to the Go Gather Wild podcast with me, your host, Matthew Gavin. On this show, I chat to experts from all areas of foraging and wild food to bring you their favourite plants, recipes, tools and techniques, and there's even some great conversations about life thrown in as well. So thank you for listening. Now here we go. Today on the podcast, I'm very excited to introduce Bill O'D, a dedicated Irish mycologist who has a passion for mushrooms like no other. Bill studied fungi at the University College Dublin, has taken groups on mushroom hunts both at home and abroad since 1996, which is a long time ago now. He knew mushrooms before they've become cool. He has appeared on national news, and his mushroom hunts have even actually been named in the top 10 events of the year by the Sunday Business Post. Bill O'D has shared his expert knowledge with everyone from chefs to universities, and he's now kindly sharing it with us today. Welcome to the Go Gather Wild podcast, Bill O'D. Bill.
Hi, Matthew.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
You too. I can't say how thrilled I am to have you on. I love mushrooms. It's a fascination of mine, and I've just been so excited to speak with you, and thank you very much for your time.
That's great. That's good to hear. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I just to give people and listeners a bit of a background knowledge. So stumbling across when you research kind of mushrooms in Ireland, there's a few people that pop up, and you're definitely the one that is the most prominent, and it's incredible. I think the most amazing piece or something that really drew me in is on your website, mushroomstuff.com. There's a video which was brilliantly produced that kind of is all about yourself, your opinions, and kind of what you do. And I think after seeing that, I knew I had to reach out based on what I was doing, and there was something to connect us there. And so that's how I've become aware of you, and ever since it's blossomed into this conversation.
Al Butler from Media Co-op did that video, and like yourself, he had an appreciation for what we were doing, and so he could catch it. He could see it. He did a great job.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely recommend any listeners or anyone watching here to check out that video. I'll have it linked in kind of show notes and everywhere else because it's a brilliant.
Yeah, and he's won a few awards in some of the movie short festivals.
Yeah. No surprise there. It's a brilliantly produced one, and it's only 12 minutes or so, or even 5 minutes actually.
It's only a few minutes.
Yeah, it's only 5 minutes, so definitely recommend people to check that out. But I'd love to start by just general casting out wide and understand kind of how a young Galway boy, growing up there, got into mushrooms and foraging in general.
Yeah, I suppose as a kid, I was out in nature, as many kids were, in those days, and you were kind of thrown out of the house, as opposed to today, kids are kept in the house.
Yeah.
And I was interested in nature, and particularly birds, and I could name all the birds when I was very young, and I could, and we used to find birds' nests and look at the eggs and things like that, and then but always protectively kind of. And then from there, I kind of started to see these mushrooms and became fascinated with them. And also in those days in Galway, my parents brought us out in season in the autumn out to East Galway was where we used to go. Actually, we lived in Salt Hill, and to pick mushrooms in the field. And it was the way it was done was you'd look for a field that had sheep in it. And it was, and then you would go in and find field mushrooms and bring them home and cook them. And there was a great fuss about those. And I suppose both of my parents would probably have had that experience as children as well. So that seems to be the only experience we have in this country of mushroom foraging. And, we're taught to, I remember as a kid, bringing home another mushroom. I know now that it was a horse mushroom. It was a big mushroom, big, beautiful horse mushroom. And with a lovely almondy smell, and bringing it home, thrilled that I'd found it one time. And my parents were, oh, no, we don't know what that is. That could be poisonous. You better bring that down to the bottom of the garden, throw it away, you put it into the ditch, make sure no one sees it, no one eats it and all that. And that kind of piqued my interest even more, because I thought, well, kind of and that again was a typical Irish experience. You know, you talk to a lot of our new Irish that have come from Europe, and they tell you about their experiences of learning about mushrooms in season and celebrating mushrooms in season, and going into the forest to find mushrooms. You know, but with us it was just the field mushroom, and so that would have been kind of my earliest experience.
You shouldn't tell a kid to stay away from something or it's dangerous because
Not a kid like me.
yeah, definitely
The
not.
other things we used to make gunpowder and stuff when we were kids. You know,
That's
anything.
hilarious. I used to spend some part of my family's from Galway, just outside of Oramore, Cashel,
Mm,
you know, just beside
mm,
the the hospital there. You
yeah.
know, before, so we used to spend our summers
Oh,
going through
yeah,
the fields there.
Renmore.
Renmore, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So we used to spend our summers going through the fields there before there was houses, housing estates, and everything like that. So
Yeah,
um, it's a beautiful part, and I
yeah,
absolutely love it. I'd
yeah,
love and to kind of touch on your point there that you spoke about, you know, the Irish experience and how we think about mushrooms here in Ireland and versus, you know, how people think. You mentioned it there from Eastern Europe and abroad. You know, you've talked about this whole fungophilic and fungophobic um,
yeah.
con- ways of thought. I'd love to talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny because if I continue on my history of with mushrooms, when I lived in the States for many years, and I like to cook, and people would bring me mushrooms. I remember the friends bringing me mushrooms, and I kind of said, "Oh, well, you can't eat those. Bring them down to the bottom of the garden and bury them, and in case someone will poison themselves." They said, "No, no, no, you can't eat them." And so I learned then about other mushrooms, and so they, you know, a lot of Americans, particularly those with Scandinavian backgrounds and German backgrounds, would have you know, a tradition of foraging mushrooms in season as well. So you see, and so that would have kind of continued me on into knowing about other mushrooms. And then there were other different mushrooms as teenagers we were able to find and identify eventually. And there were
These were the fun ones you'd take, or
some of them were, yeah, yeah. Um, God knows, you know, people looking for magic mushrooms in fields end up eating an awful lot of potentially dangerous
yeah,
mushrooms.
yeah, absolutely.
You know, I've had a few weeks people that I know that had problems there because of poisoning themselves.
Yeah, yeah, it can be really dangerous. And were
Yeah, and
you a
then
chef?
I am a chef in terms of I'm a cook that cooks for myself and my friends.
Yeah,
I could run a kitchen or a restaurant, but I'd like to think I could. I've been passionate about cooking. Yeah.
brilliant. And then so where did you kind of take it after living in America, being introduced to more mushrooms from that?
Then when I eventually I moved to Ireland, and I was supposed to move back to Ireland, and I ended up doing a course in UCD. At that stage, there was a professor of mycology, Hubert Fuller, in UCD, and there's no longer a professor for mycology in this country, which is incredible. Like, it's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I didn't know that. That's a huge
Yeah,
gap, isn't it? Or
it's a huge gap. If you see the significance of fungi to our lives and to medicine and to food and all of that, I mean, it's absolutely, you know, a very important part of a lot of what we do. But so then I learned from him. That was more kind of formal training in identification and about what mushrooms are and about fungi in general. And then I went on, and eventually I approached a local. There's a very good shop out where I live called Caviston's, and I approached Peter Caviston and said, let's do a mushroom hunt. Do you want to do a mushroom hunt? Your customers and I'll do the." And he jumped at it, and we started doing mushroom hunts. And I did a few great mushroom hunts with Caviston's back then, and we used to go down to Fitzgerald's pub in Sandy Cove, and we'd start there and go out, and we'd get buses and go out, and then we'd have lunch out in the woods, and we had uh, we had some of the it was a wine, and we, you know, cook up some mushrooms and different food and that.
it's brilliant.
Was,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's where kind of mushroom stuff then and your website and the courses have has progressed into. You know.
yeah. yeah, that was kind of the start, and then we've gone on from there. So that was a long time ago, and yeah, now we do. I mean, we do kind of annual mushroom hunts in places like Kilruddery and
Yeah,
where we do a full day, and including lunch and you know
everything else, and
we,
we'll definitely get,
we
we
have
can get
different experts and chefs and that as guests, and you get to taste a lot of mushrooms and identify them. First of all, we teach you how to identify them, find them. Then we go out and do a forage. Then you bring the mushrooms back. We do identification, and then we cook them. Then you get to taste them. And in the middle of that, we've different chefs and guest foragers involved as well. So the idea is that ultimately you get to identify them, find them, cook them, and taste them. So you kind of close the loop.
yeah,
And
it's amazing.
yeah. Normally we'd like to get people to learn, 3 or 4 new mushrooms maybe when they come on one of our events. Like we might identify. I mean, we've identified up to 110 different types of fungi of mushrooms, but you know, realistically, if people can pick up 2 or 3 that they're sure of, that's kind of what we try to do on our mushroom events.
Yeah, one of your sayings is, I think it was in that
There's
video.
old, bold, and there's no.
Yeah, there's which is it there? There's old mushrooms and there's bold mushrooms.
There's old mushroom hunters and there's bold mushroom hunters, but there's no old, bold mushroom hunters.
Exactly, and that's it. So it's very much, stick to what you know and everything else leave it out. And is there any say, I'd love to kind of demystify and bridge the gap here for people in terms of, mushrooms, like you said, can be so scary, but they're actually, they should be our best friends. We're more close to them than people think. And I'd love to talk about that a bit more. You've spoken about how close we are actually in terms of evolutionary wise, even
Yeah,
to mushrooms, and how there's this huge, symbiosis between us, and they're all over our bodies and in our bodies. And
yeah,
I'd love to kind of tell people how connected we actually are to fungi.
yeah. It's we are on the evolutionary life uh, evolutionary map. We are on the same line as fungi. Like we are closer to fungi, and we are of fungi than we are to plants. Plants are on a different line, and the cell walls in fungi have chitin in them, as do so they're more similar to us than they are to plants. People are inclined to think that mushrooms are a type of plant
Yeah.
or vegetable, but they're not. Um, and also in terms of fighting off pathogens, this is one of the reasons that we get some very effective medicines and antibiotics and that from fungi, because they're closer to us, but they're more evolved than we are. They've been on the planet for, I think it's 1.2 billion years, or over a billion years, shall we say? And they're highly evolved, and they're very adept at protecting themselves from different pathogens.
Yeah, I think there's a few even, you hear of the ones that can do better subway maps than city planners when you put them
Yeah,
in mazes.
yeah, the slime molds.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, slime molds are incredible. Um, they're very strange, and they evolve. They have different phases in their life cycle, where they manifest themselves in different ways, and they can, yeah, do mazes, and they can exhibit all kinds of uh, intelligence. I mean, you see this with fungi in general. They're like orchestrators. So in a forest, you have fungi that work, some with specific trees. So they have a relationship at the root level where they're feeding and exchanging nutrients with the trees and the plants. And some of those fungi are specific to certain trees, and some are specific to other types of trees. And then there are other fungi that are kind of gateway guys in the middle that are passing nutrients from the fungi that's specific to, say, a pine tree to the fungi that's specific to a birch tree. And so you have this incredible intelligence. Is probably, it's like the intelligence of nature going on all the time with these nutrients going backwards and forwards. And the trees actually, they say now that the way to look on trees, they're more like a family than we plant grids of trees and they're all
Yeah, yeah.
controlled and cut down as grids, but trees actually operate in a kind of a symbiotic way with each other where they can exchange nutrients. So a big tree, may be able to take a drought easier than the smaller or younger trees, and it may give up some of its moisture to the other trees, or some nutrients to the other trees when they're under pressure.
And that's all
This is
through the fungi.
all the time. Yeah, yeah,
It's amazing, and that's like there's this world and ecosystem that's extremely alive and happening kind of underneath our feet that no one knows
yeah.
about.
When you see if you see the grass, untreated grass, people will have it on their lawns. You see the fairy rings. They're all fungi exchanging nutrients, and at the edge of the fungal colony, that's where you have those. Yeah, the nutrients are most concentrated, and that's why you get this rich grass. There might be nitrogen being produced for the grass, and the grass is benefiting from it.
It's
And
amazing.
you'll notice, you watch those fairy rings, and at certain times of the year they will produce a certain type of mushroom.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. And one of the things you touched on, in terms of like we are fungi is everywhere, and it's your microbiome and
Yeah,
everything like that. And a lot of people now, and research is coming out in terms of, you know, are we controlled by our microbiome, or, do we, control ourselves?
yeah. What are we? Because we're more. I think we're 90% uh, other life forms, fungi and bacteria, and 10% human cells.
Yeah,
So, and our gut is actually external to our body.
right. Can you go
It's
into that a bit
actually
more?
external, and so we have all of that microbiome, all that fungi and bacteria, and that working away in our gut to our benefit, or to our detriment, I suppose, too.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, which is the dominant life form, fungi here, or us, and
Yeah.
we might not be as smart as we think we are.
Well, no, you see, and here's the other thing. I was talking about the grass and the all the fungi. I mean, there are thousands of different types of fungi on a healthy lawn, say.
Hmm.
Lawn is probably not a healthy sign, but where grass grows,
Yeah,
and that's that is doing everything from it's keeping the soil healthy, and that whole ecosystem working right with all the worms and the insects and the grubs and everything in there. And it's also retaining water, and most importantly, it's retaining carbon. So we have huge carbon banks. They're absorbing carbon into the soil and locking it into the soil because it's necessary for all of this underground ecosystem to grow. It needs carbon. So
yeah,
there are huge carbon banks. And when you go and go into an environment like that and spray it with poisons and fungicides and things and kill it, render it dead, then all the carbon is released. So, if you look at the scale of farming, of the mass farming across the world, that's what they're doing.
yeah,
They've more or less made that soil, they kill the soil, and it releases all its carbon and doesn't reabsorb carbon until eventually it recovers if they stop spraying it. But that takes God knows how long.
yeah.
So
And it's all those kind of
it's all
things.
those simple things that people dismiss as irrelevant. That's what we keep getting wrong. It's working. It has been working, and we need to work with it, as opposed to, we humans, certainly in the Western world, we have this arrogance that, well, that's ours, like, and I mean,
Yeah,
that's, it doesn't suit us that that's there. We want to put something else there. We want to do it our way. And the whole idea of tidying up. We should have everything should be tidy. If the grass is there, it should be cut. This should be, we don't want weeds. What are weeds? Weeds are really native flowers. We
yeah,
don't mind bringing in imported flowers and planting them, and they're flowers and they're desirable, but our native flowers that the birds poo onto the grass, the seeds, we don't want those. They're bad. And
Yeah,
it's really, I suppose, it's just that, but it's amazing like how people don't question this. They just accept it. I mean, people, otherwise nice people will go out into their garden and spray Roundup and that around the garden.
yeah,
They might
true.
even be eating berries out of the garden.
Yeah, true. And even I'm like, I've gone to places or even around, and one of the big things I don't get personally is how, there's not more edible plants and trees and bushes and things that look better than some of the stuff that's planted around apartment
Yeah,
blocks or houses or highways or whatever it is, these type of native species, but also ones that are just edible, and they've
yeah.
beautiful flowers and everything, but you can't eat them. And it's again, you mentioned the imported stuff and the foreign, things that aren't edible at all, or don't really have that much benefit to the ecosystem. They just look better.
Yeah, it's kind of domination. It's kind of, well, it's ours to tidy it up, so we'll brand it as owned by us, as opposed to allowing nature to.
Yeah, it's a strange one. And talking about that kind of nature and how everything kind of grows and interacts, I'd love to let people know kind of when I'm talking to my friends and they don't know much about mushrooms, or we're out and we see one and I try saying, you know, what that actually is. When you see a mushroom above the ground, it's almost like an apple coming from a tree. That well, mushroom is the apple, but the whole tree is there as well. And I think you actually have even a bag or a prop to show us, that you can actually show us a live kind of medium and explain to us how it goes from, spores to everything else.
Here's what I made earlier.
It's like Ready Steady Cook or something, isn't it? Like, here we go. Amazing.
That's
So
that's pink oyster. You see the white patches in there?
yep.
That's all mycelium, and this is on wood chips. And it's that mycelium is growing through there, and it's breaking down all this stuff, and it will eventually. That's not open to the air right now, but when we open that, it will eventually produce mushrooms.
And how does a mushroom go from a spore to being a mushroom? You mentioned mycelium, but what is that
Yeah,
and
so
where
so
does
the
it?
mycelium is like the roots. Well, a mushroom produces a spore, which is like the seed. So the mushroom is the fruiting body of the organism. So what we're looking at here is the main part. This stuff. This is a mycelium colony here. That's really the organism.
Right.
That's what's under the ground that produces mushrooms, or in trees or wherever, when you see mushrooms popping out of trees. And so that's when the conditions are right, that will produce a mushroom, which is a fruiting body. And the purpose of the mushroom is to spread the spores, and they do that very effectively. There's a whole study about how mushrooms spread spores, but they're very effective at doing it. And then the spores, under the right conditions. Now, there's a bit of sex involved here, so I don't necessarily want to dive into it.
This is an
But
R-rated podcast. Go ahead.
there are actually hundreds of sexes. So uh,
Really?
yes, so
I didn't know that at all.
well, so the combinations are just mind blowing. So they anyway.
Can you speak to
The
that a bit
boys,
more? Because I actually think that's really interesting. Can you touch on that for a bit?
well, I don't understand it
Right.
well enough.
Okay.
Um,
Fair
but
enough.
I know that there are only certain ones that can uh, combine with the other to create what ultimately becomes these roots. So the hyphae are the little threads, and then if they cross each other, it becomes like roots, and then you're into the mycelium stage, and then that's what you're seeing here. When they start to come together and clump together,
Yeah.
and and then that starts to grow then as a colony, and then that eventually will produce mushrooms
And mushrooms don't
to
need
again.
sunlight, do they?
No, they don't, and that's why they've survived. That's why they've been on the planet so long, because they've survived some of the extinction events, because they don't need light.
Yeah.
And it's funny too. That's probably why all are possibly in nature. There's no such thing as all, but almost all plants on the planet um, have a mycorrhizal relationship with fungi. Um,
Yes.
they have to have it, and that helped. I suppose plants that didn't have it during some of the extinction events never returned.
And we
Uh,
talk about kind of that sunlight, and they don't need sunlight to grow, but more and more now in this kind of COVID world and people focusing on the immune system, you know, mushrooms are a great source of vitamin D, and what how is that, or why is that? I traditionally think
yeah,
that
they're like us. It's a similar mechanism that when we're exposed to sunlight, we produce vitamin D, and
yeah.
mushrooms are the same. And if you expose mushrooms to sunlight, they produce vitamin D. I think it's actually UV light, um, but there was a stage. I don't know. I did see it in Ireland at one stage a couple of years ago. But one of the big mushroom producers was producing vitamin D enhanced mushrooms, and
I've seen that in on the shelves in Lidl, I think it is.
yeah, and that's basically they expose them to light for a period of time, and that boosts their vitamin D hugely.
So do you think people should keep their mushrooms in the fridge or keep them, out?
Well, if you want to get the vitamin D boost, they say turn them gills up to the sun and leave them in the sun for a few hours. You'll notice they do change when you do that. Um, that does boost the vitamin D in them.
And I'll definitely
And vitamin D is a complex thing. There's different types of vitamin D. I
yeah,
mean, vitamin D is actually a hormone,
right.
and there's different types of vitamin D. And the kind of vitamin D that you get from mushrooms is very bioavailable for us. So it's a
Yeah.
vitamin D.
Which means
Of
we
course, like
can
anything, if you're eating a whole food as opposed to just an isolated extract, you're usually getting the nutrients that you need around it to be able to absorb it and process the vitamin and absorb it into your system.
yeah, so when you speak of bioavailability, that's, more of the nutrients gets into your body. And it's kind of like when people say if you have a turmeric shot, you grind a bit of black pepper on top of it because whatever's in the black pepper makes it easier to absorb. And that's makes total sense, if you're
Mm.
actually eating the mushroom and it's creating vitamin D inside of it and it's enriched. I'm going to be doing that with my mushrooms from now on. I'm definitely going to
Mm.
be turning them upside down and see. And this is all about making mushrooms more applicable to people. So whether they're finding it out, out in wherever they might find it. But
Mm.
would you have any kind of tips or key kind of watch outs? Is there particular tasty mushrooms that are easy to identify for beginners? What would you say to someone who's just going out now for the
I
first
would
time?
say concentrate on learning two or three of the good eaters,
Yeah,
and also the poisonous ones and the serious poisonous ones. There's not that many seriously poisonous, um, but it would be good to learn about, say the Amanita verosa or the death cap or the angel of death or the some of the ones, the funeral bell, maybe to learn about those is important as well. And if you start at those two extremes, because they say this figure varies all over the place, but the say 7,000 mushroom producing types of fungi in Ireland,
wow.
and um, and we see it in our mushroom hunts where we end up with a lot of different mushrooms to identify, and the vast majority of them are kind of not particularly edible, or they might cause indigestion, or so really the ones you try to focus on are the few good eaters and the few toxic ones.
And would you have any particularly good eaters?
Um, well, I mean, the obvious ones like the sep and which is porcini, the and the penny bun. That's the same mushroom. Um, Chanterelles, parasols. Mushrooms that are good to relatively easy to identify. That's the other thing we do on our mushroom hunts, is we kind of concentrate on the ones that are easy to identify,
Yeah.
easier to identify.
And you say I like the sep, or that's a polypore, which some mushrooms actually might
No,
surprise people
it's
to.
not a sep is a bullish.
Yeah, bollet. Sorry.
Yeah, but polypore grows out of a tree. Um,
And would you talk about that kind of a bit more about how, you know, some mushrooms, not all mushrooms have gills, basically.
Yeah, so yeah, if you're looking for the sep, the one of the identification criteria is it doesn't have gills. It has these little pores under the cap, and I don't have wrong time of year. If it was the right time of year, I'd have
Yeah.
some. And you, so that's one of the identification criteria. And the other thing worth doing is having a little bit of a knowledge of trees, because the people who are good at finding mushrooms are usually, it's the trees that they're looking at, and you'll see discussion amongst some of the good mushroom foragers, is right. So right now we're seeing a lot of this around Scots pine or something like that, or now it's moved on and we're seeing it around another, we've seen it more around oaks and
Oh,
birches or whatever. So you see that kind of discussion, the knowledge of trees is helpful as well. And as
yeah.
the season progresses, they change. Sometimes change where you'll find the same mushroom.
And say, what would you say? We're coming into, you know, it's just finishing March here now, and
Mm.
April's starting up, and what would people look out for over the next month or two?
Well, for the past while, things like the velvet shank, which is an ice eater that grows out of trees. It's a lovely kind of orangey yellow mushroom with a kind of a typically a dark stem, and it's a sweet tasting mushroom, very tasty mushroom.
Yeah.
Um,
I I got some velvet shanks up in Howth actually. So if anyone's up on walks in Howth, they're
yeah,
growing out of the trees there, or where 2 weeks ago. So
yeah, with a tasty.
yeah, I've never had them before. And normally kind of what I do is if I do see a mushroom that I don't know, I generally pick it and take it home and try identify it. And
Yeah,
if I'm absolutely sure about what it is, I'll give it a small taste
yeah,
and then see. And I couldn't get over how sweet it was. It was really strange. It was
it
almost
is, yeah,
I described it to my partner as a dessert mushroom.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
yeah, I couldn't believe it.
That and oyster mushrooms,
Hmm.
um, um, elf cups. The little red cup fungi. Have you seen those?
No, I haven't seen elf cups. No, no.
Yeah, and the Judas ear, which is the jelly ear mushroom. Do you know that one?
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. They actually remarkably look exactly like in here.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
There's a kind of a false narrative about political correctness, where people refer to them as Jews' ears. Um, it was in fact they are in fact called the Judas ear because they grow out of uh, elder trees, and supposedly um, Judas was hung on an elder tree.
oh wow.
And but there was this kind of political correctness that, well, no, you can't call them that because you can't call them Jews' ears,
Hmm.
and that's anti-Semitic, and so now people don't use that term anymore. But in fact, I don't think it was ever really Jews' ears. It was Judas' ears.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It just kind of was
Yeah, I think the
misheard.
Latin name is Judea. I forget the Latin name, something Judea, and
It
yeah,
just kind of morphed.
auricula. Is it auricula Judea? Anyway, that was the origin of those. I wouldn't consider them a great eater, but I know some people who soak them in vodka and dip them in chocolate and use them like jelly.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
that's
a unique one. I haven't heard of that one.
yeah, that's
I've
one of the ways of eating them.
I definitely, I mean, surprisingly, my favorite mushroom, and I didn't know about it till last year, was the amethyst deceiver.
Mm.
Yeah, and I found that to be the taste of that one was incredible. It
Yeah,
was
it varies. Yeah, some people. The other one that's good is the fairy ring champignon.
right.
It's very unimpressive. Like they're small little mushrooms that grow in rings, and you see them on lawns regularly. And it's a very tasty mushroom. They're small, and you could pick quite a few of them fairly quickly, but they have a lovely flavor.
Yeah, and I think
And
that's the big thing. Like people, the mush, and it's something to get across. Mushrooms in the wild are so different to what you get in the supermarket,
yeah,
flavor wise, texture wise,
yeah,
everything.
Yeah, you see, you can't. A lot of the wild mushrooms can't be grown
Yeah,
commercially, so and they're not suitable. Real mushrooms aren't suitable for supermarket selling because they don't really have a shelf life, and many of them will have little worms and things like that develop in them. So they're not really something you could sell in the supermarket.
yeah.
So when you see wild mushrooms in the supermarket, it's typically oysters and shiitakes and the cultivated enoki and things like that. They're but they're not real wild mushrooms. Although occasionally I know there was, I think Tesco had winter chanterelles last year. I think they got them in Romania that were foraged, but that's a mushroom that wouldn't be prone to maggots and things, worms.
And would you have any recommendations for people in terms of places, not just kind of in Dublin and Wicklow? I mean, I certainly would
Yeah,
recommend a few different places, but around Ireland.
yeah. I mean, it's really every place is different, so it's not a question of is one place better than another. Um, it's what's around you, and often what's in your garden or what's in the little bit of scrubland, or if people are, you know, the little field down the road where they bring the dog or something like that. Keep an eye there and see what comes up, and notice that it comes back. Every year it comes back.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, people, should understand is that even whether everyone now in lockdown, you see people walking around their 5K and you know what's there a lot more. You might know there's this, patch that you've never been to before. Now you've walked it loads, but certainly over the coming months, people will start to see different types of mushrooms come up around just anywhere in their
Yeah.
local grass, around bushes, trees.
Yeah, the other one's coming up now this time of year, so we'll be looking at morels coming up soon, um, and the St. George's mushroom, which is a lovely mushroom, really nice mushroom. Actually, smells kind of almondy, almost marzipan-y,
Wow. Yeah.
um, and that grows in grass and fairy rings, and it's a good fleshy mushroom. It's a nice, really good eater, um, and they grow around St. George's Day, which I think is the 20th or 21st of April. That's why they're called the St. George's mushroom. Morels are good, and morels are like little brains. They're hard to find wild. The best chance of finding morels is usually on mulch for some reason, and so yeah, they're the kind of mushrooms that
And
that
the
will be.
morel is like little do people know, but that morel mushroom you mentioned is a fine dining kind of staple, which is an extremely popular one with chefs and very, very expensive. So,
Very expensive.
they can get it for free if they're lucky enough. And
Well, we bring people out to Turkey. I speak at a Morel Festival in Turkey up in the mountains in the state of Mugla, and they we bring groups of people out there for the Morel Festival. So it's this little Morel Festival in a small village, Uzumlu, up in the mountains in Mugla, and a most heavenly place. And we find lots of morels out there.
so are there any other I mean this I only discovered there was mushroom festivals through watching you and seeing what you
Yeah.
were doing and researching, and it'll definitely be one of the holidays that I want to go on. And obviously, you take groups like you mentioned to Turkey, to Morels, but are there any others out there?
Yeah. Like we do trips to. We were in Asturias was the last one, which is in northern Spain, and they have a mushroom festival in autumn. I think kind of around the start of November, and then there's one we went to in France, um, where it's up in the mountains in the Central Massif. Uh, what's the name of the place? Saint Bonnet le Foix, which is a small little village up there. The only thing it's got, aside from it's a lovely village and have very few people live in it, but it's got a 3 Michelin star restaurant, and they do a mushroom festival every year.
Amazing.
And the whole village becomes people come to visit and eat mushrooms, and there's one in I know we've done mushroom festivals in Sardinia. They have a mushroom festival every year, and then the other place we've gone to a mushroom festival is in Lithuania. There's a town called Varina that has an annual mushroom festival, and you go there, and they have a park that's full of all these stalls and with every kind of food and mushrooms, and mushrooms like I've never seen before that they eat, and you learn about them there and get to taste them, and then things like wild honey on sale, and
Yeah,
because in a lot of those cultures they still have a very strong foraging sense. They haven't lost it, so they're very passionate about foraging and eating wild foods in
definitely.
season,
And one
and
of
preserving,
those,
of course, which goes with it.
yeah, and one of the things about mushrooms is I think would surprise a lot of people is what they're turned into or used, not just for food. They're all sorts of things. I've seen hats, or I think
Yeah.
you've a bit of surprise for people here about what a mushroom or how you can use a mushroom and what it can be turned into. Yeah, exactly. So can you talk a bit for listeners? Bill is wearing
That is
a scarf, if you can
now
describe it.
Bill. We have Bill now wearing a. So
Yeah.
that's dyed, and if you saw it, it's quite rich gold. It's dyed with a dyer's maize gill, which is an interesting looking mushroom, but you'd never imagine how you get this color out of it, and you get a bright gold out of it. And you can see we've got
So just for everyone who's
yarn
listening
here,
and not on the video, Bill's has this like beautiful gold kind of, what would you call that, Bill? A scarf or
scarf, I suppose. Yeah,
yeah,
just put it
and
around my
it
neck so I wouldn't forget about it.
yeah, and
Yeah,
the and it's amazing. And he's dyed these with mushrooms and
yeah. It's my wife Frida who does that, and there's darn that she's dyed with different types of mushrooms, and you can see some of the colors here. These are all wools that she's dyed with mushrooms.
oh, and how does that happen? How does it
It's not
work?
easy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like you, well, the dyer's maize gill, that's what the mushroom's called,
Right.
dyers, and you have to boil it for a period of time, and then I think that it's the mordant or fixing the dye is I think, I don't know if she does it with salt or how it's done, but it does produce this wonderful color.
Yeah,
It's
and it,
amazing because you've got such you know different colors of mushrooms that can produce completely different dyes. You can get green and blue and everything as well.
it's amazing, and even down to, whether it's some mushrooms being used for leather or,
Yeah,
whatever they wear.
yeah, they're using them for leather. You see the Amadou hats and they make from mushrooms, and yeah, and I mean, then also, I mean, in our medicine and food, I mean, anything that's fermented, alcohol, cheese, bread, yogurts, all of those things need fungi in them to work, and so it's quite amazing. Even then, cured sausages and things, you see they grow the mold that's part of the curing, and then in terms of medicine, there's I mean even right down to detergents, things that when they talk about these little microbes in your washing machine,
Yeah,
they're actually developed from fungi. They're fungal microbes.
yeah. There's definitely I'd say a modern mushroom revolution almost, coming through where people are discovering more and more uses of mushrooms, like that, the chemicals within them or whatever
We
it may be.
we do turkey tails. People came to me looking for turkey tails, and at the time, this was many years ago. At the time, I was wondering why do you And they said, well, look, would you come with us? We'd pay you to come with us for a day to help us identify them. I was thinking, what is this turkey tails? And they're being used to treat many different serious illnesses. I'm not allowed to say that they can be effective in doing it, but if you research turkey tails, you'll see a lot of references to treating particular types of cancer. People have found them useful.
Yeah, it's like a herbal remedy. It's
Yeah.
not clinically proven, but it's certainly used as a
Well, it's they are, in terms of there are many medical clinical trials done on them, and with all kinds of evidence of the effect they've had. And turkey tails are currently being they're going undergoing an FDA trial in the States at Bastyr University on treating breast cancer.
Wow.
And that, but they're not patentable.
Yeah.
They don't really lend themselves to big pharma, and to get anything through a trial. So like turkey tails are a standard part of any cancer treatment in Japan, as paid for by their Department of Health.
Wow. So Japan actually, pays for their
Yeah,
cancer
yeah,
patients to
yeah,
take turkey tail.
yeah, yeah.
That's incredible.
It's an adjunct therapy to chemotherapy, and it helps with the recovery of chemo sessions and with some of the symptoms to reduce some of the symptoms of chemo.
That's amazing.
And that's what they're being used for. And for thousands of years they've been used like that. And in Asia, like we have Chinese people who buy turkey tails from us, who would have a history of knowing it as a way to benefit them, particularly around cancer.
And I think it's brilliant. Like
And historically, they would have that knowledge, and that's been used for thousands of years. But like we did, people came to us to find turkey tails, and initially we would find them and give them the turkey tails, but there's no continuity in that, and people come back, I need more, and we said, well, we don't have any more. So and so eventually we developed a supplement, and we now have this is our turkey tail supplement.
And is that in? So and to me it looks. Is it in capsules? I've seen
Yes,
turkey tails on a branch.
capsules. It's in capsules, and it's micronized powder. These are organic. They're micronized powder, so it's very finely ground to fracture the cell wall to make it bioavailable. Because the thing with turkey tails is that you could eat turkey tails and they just pass through you, but you don't get the nutrients.
Right.
You want the polysaccharides and the triterpenes and that, but you don't get those unless you have to process them. And there's different ways you can do it, but one of the most effective ways is to micronize them, and that's so that they're micronized turkey tail fruiting bodies in those capsules.
And people can get these on your mushroomstuff.com website. I presume they're available there.
Yeah. And we do. We've also started to do lion's mane as well. In fact, I think one of these guys that we're growing here is a lion's mane.
That's amazing.
So we do lion's mane also.
Can you talk a bit more about lion's mane? What is that?
Well, again, there are lots of studies, clinical studies that you can look up. The lion's mane is people feel it benefits any brain issues, so things like recovery from strokes, MS, and that we have people who are taking lion's mane and they feel they benefit significantly. I mean, hugely from taking lion's mane.
Wow.
So again, I'm not allowed to say they can do.
No, yeah, I totally get it. And people can research.
People do their own research, and what we do is we just make sure that we've got a high quality organic lion's mane, and that's the part that we focus on, and then people can do their own research and certainly from some of the people that we are supplying them to are passionate about the improvements they've experienced.
And do you put them, is it the same as the turkey tail? You've ground them down into, the powder, and then you put them in the capsule. So they're very easy to take. And they're highly bioavailable. As you said, you can get a lot of the nutrients into your body.
We also do a twin extract of those as well, where they're extracted using alcohol and hot water, which gets even more nutrients out of them. But if you find turkey tail and you want to take it, the best way is to make a tea with it. But what you do is we simmer it overnight. Like put it in a slow cooker is ideal. You don't want the water boiling. You want it just kind of a slow simmer, and leave it in there for hours, and that will produce a tea that has a lot of the nutrients in it.
That's I'm definitely going to try that. I often see turkey tail, growing, and it's too fibrous. It's like a disc, so I've never
Yeah,
known, I've never picked it because it hasn't been something that I've known how to process,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. That's the way. Make a tea. I mean, we do that with others. Birch polypore is a great one that we use in this house. Also, if there's any sign of a cold, um, we we make a birch polypore tea, similar to the way I said the turkey tail. You make turkey tail tea, and it's bitter, and it's one or two doses of that, and you're fine. You'll find that it seems to knock colds and possibly flu before they develop into flu.
Yeah. The one of the things, like, again, that's like kind of again, like if you're cutting a turkey tail, which people can look up and see what it looks like, and if you're cutting it off a tree, or again a birch polypore, when you're cutting off a tree, you know
Yes, you need a mushroom knife.
you need a mushroom knife, but also it's very important. Obviously, mushroom knives, and they're shaped differently. But can you explain to people a good way to, cut mushrooms? Should you pull them directly out of the ground, or break them off the tree, or
This is a very controversial subject. There are those, and it has largely to do with where you've been brought up. I think in Italy they say that, probably northern Italy is different to southern Italy, but in Italy they say that you should always, I think you pluck the mushroom. So say a cep or a porcino, and then you pare so you get your knife, and in situ you pare off the bits and pieces off the mushroom there and then, and then they fall on the ground in the place where the mushroom came from.
right?
And so that's the way they do it. There are some places that swear that you have to cut the mushroom, and you should always cut a mushroom. And then there are those who feel you should pluck a mushroom. And there's no reconciliation. They're all. You'll see this on Facebook discussions, that there's people are swearing blind that you have to cut them, and only idiots are plucking them. Why would you say, well, why would you cut them? Nature doesn't cut things, it plucks them. And
That's funny. So it's up for debate. People can be
it's something for debate. Now, I would say that you pluck them. I
right.
mean, obviously, if you're picking you pluck them.
So I wonder, do people go around saying, "I'm not a mushroom plucker. I'm a mushroom plucker son"?
I'm only plucking mushrooms.
Exactly. And these, so I'd love to show people, and now, and for everyone listening and watching, Bill showed me this, probably the most pimped out, amazing mushroom knife I've ever seen that he has here. So, and I'd love, can we talk about it a bit?
Yeah. So these are mushroom. This is your foraging knife. So it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be specifically
mushroom.
mushroom.
Yeah.
But for all your foraging, your knife is handy. And these are um, knives that we get made in Pakistan. They're really, really high quality. And you've got your brush. So you shouldn't really wash mushrooms. So you'll find how practical these are when you start using them, when you've got a basket of mushrooms you're collecting. So you brush off your debris, and then you've got a scraper here that you can scrape off stuff. And then with your blade, it's good for paring. You can see here you've got that rounded blade. If you notice that blade,
We can see the lines in it. There's
you see the
lines.
patina on that blade.
Yeah.
That's actually, we have just a limited version of Damascus steel. So we have some foraging knives with Damascus steel blades. We just thought we'd get some as a kind of um, as you say, a super pimped out foraging knife.
And you've
That's
designed these
that's
yourself to be like the optimum. Everyone here, did you specifically request those kind of scrape
Yes,
cuts at
but
the back?
we didn't design them, but that's the design that we wanted.
Okay.
Yeah, and
It's incredible. And Damascus steel, for people that don't know, is one of the best quality steels in the world.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very expensive. I mean, but so we've two types. Like we have the regular steel knife, which you can see here,
Yeah.
and you see the smooth steel, and then the Damascus steel one is. You see the difference.
Yeah, you can absolutely see the difference.
Yeah.
And you have, I've noticed on the handle there, even you have like kind of gold inlays and a grip kind of etched
Yeah,
into it.
brass inlays. Yeah,
It's beautiful. And
they're
okay,
beautiful. These are made by craft knife makers in Pakistan.
yeah.
Um,
And how did that come about? Did you just search, who could make mushroom knives, or did you
yeah,
meet these
we
people?
wanted to just source good quality mushroom knives, and they were the best we could find.
That's amazing.
And they are really really beautiful.
And when you say limited quantity, you've only, say, a short supply of the Damascus steel
Yeah,
one.
we only got a few of the Damascus steel. I think we have 15 or 20 of them or something like that. Um, and then we've a lot more of the other guy.
Yeah. And these aren't currently on your website, but they will be. Is this
They
something?
are they are actually on our website.
Okay.
Yeah, they
Right.
are
So,
on our website. So mushroomstuff.com. Well, and that brings you to our Shopify shop,
right.
which is you'll find them there.
And I'd love to. One of the things that I found fascinating when I was looking at your website and your shop is you actually sell inoculated trees for
Yeah,
truffles.
when we get when we can, yeah. Truffle inoculated trees, yeah.
And truffles are obviously the mushroom that people, go crazy about. It's
Mm.
huge.
Yeah, truffles. I mean, we find truffles in Ireland. Truffles are not uncommon in different parts of Ireland. We find them all over Ireland, and we find them in suburban gardens. People will contact me and say, "I think I've got a truffle in my garden. My dog dug it up, or something like that." And it's amazing how common they are around the country. There's not a county really that we haven't uh, got truffles from or found truffles in.
There's a gold mine of truffles waiting to be tapped here in Ireland by the
There
sounds of
is,
it.
and of course, everyone thinks as soon as they find truffles, they think, "Oh my God, I'm gonna go in and sell them to the most expensive restaurant in town and make a fortune." And you can. I mean, there are certain opportunities to do that, but it depends on the flavor and the type of truffle they are. Some are more desirable than others.
Yeah. And
But yeah,
how
we have truffle trees that are inoculated with uh, summer truffles, and they grow. They can grow truffles around the roots in the right conditions.
and that
Um,
can happen in Ireland. Like I always thought that you might even like truffles normally came, say, from France, as my or Italy or somewhere warm.
yeah, no,
Oh,
we've lots of truffles in Ireland. They're indigenous. They're natural. Lots of different types.
I'm a big fan of the truffle oils and everything like that. So
Well, truffle oil is typically it's artificial
yeah, it's synthetic.
flavor. It's not. It's not. There's no truffle. They're tricky on the labels that they say contain such and such truffle, or so they might put a truffle in it, but in general it doesn't impart flavor. I mean, if you put truffles in oil, it doesn't impart flavor to the oil.
Well, it just keeps them and probably preserves them if you just
Well,
keep them in oil.
it's actually dangerous because you can have botulism develop.
Yeah.
It's anaerobic. If you take something from the ground and put it in oil, it can develop botulism. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, you need to know what you're doing. There's
Yeah.
a few, and that probably brings us nicely into, I'd say, learning about what you're doing and this kind of constant learning. One of the beauties of foraging and looking for mushrooms, etc., and going one by one, there's always something new to learn. And is there any kind of resources or books? I know, like I can see you've even like stuff on the shelf behind you or whatever. What would you recommend for beginners or just people in general who are interested in foraging and
Yeah,
mushrooms?
I mean, Roger Phillips' books are good. Mushrooms of Great Britain and Ireland, or Mushrooms of Europe, I think. He's got a book just called Mushrooms, but any of his books are quite good. Um, you mentioned John Wright. Actually, John Wright, his book, River Cottage book,
Yeah,
is quite good. It's because that's
here.
focused more on edible mushrooms. Um, and also, I find doing searches on the internet, everyone has enough cop on to know that things on the internet aren't always correct, but it can be useful. Like if you find a big yellow trumpet shaped mushroom, if you do a search on big yellow trumpet shaped mushroom, and then look at the pictures at the picture search, and you'll see mushrooms that possibly look like the one that you found, and then kind of go from there. But just make sure you get back to a relatively reliable source in terms of identifying what type of mushroom, but it's a good indicator of what type of mushroom it might be.
Yeah, definitely, and it's definitely after COVID times and when things open up, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later. The mushroom courses, like I can't emphasize enough to whether it's your course, if you're in Ireland here or wherever you might be, a mushroom course and an expert guide that actually you come away with. I've done one or two, and you do come away with those from those with a definite understanding of, okay, I know this one thing and I'm going to keep an eye out for that. Or
Yeah, and we're doing last year with COVID. We did a few small mushroom hunts with just 15 people, where we go
Mm,
out at for kind of half a day, and we cook up the mushrooms and that. And we're actually fun. We'll be doing a load of those again this year. We're probably limited to 15 people, and go out in the woods together in season, and find a few mushrooms, and we bring cooking, and I bring my soup. I make this great soup in season again, a great mushroom soup, and it's a nice day out, and you get to learn, realistically 2 or 3 mushrooms, but we'll identify an awful lot more than that. But
yeah.
you should be able to come away with being able to identify 2 or 3 with a level of confidence.
Yeah, that's definitely it. I think I was on a mushroom, course before, and like you said, the basket is maybe full of maybe 10 edible mushrooms, but you can only remember one or two that you're like, I think I know this one really well, and I know a bit about this other one. And I'd love your mushroom courses. They're done in Co-Rotary House, and you said what
Well, we
format
do
are
a big
those, and how
one.
does it look?
Yeah, the Rotary ones are quite big, and we have a catered lunch and all of that out there, and it's a beautiful place, Kilrotary, and yeah, so that's starts in the morning with tea and coffee, and I do a presentation with pictures, lots of pictures, and lots of bits and pieces of information about mushrooms in general, all the interesting, crazy aspects of fungi, and then we do a forage, and then we will come back and have lunch, and we do more identification in the afternoon, and we have chefs there who cook up different types of mushrooms, and we do maybe a bit on preserving foods and use dried mushrooms and that as well, and
So that's a full day. Is it 8 hours?
yeah, well, it's we kick off we start about 9:30, and we'd be finished maybe 4:30 or 5, depending.
It sounds like a haven for anyone who's into mushrooms.
Yeah,
Definitely try it out.
yeah, there's that, and then there's the shorter ones where we meet in the morning at a secret location at about 11, I think, and then that one's probably finished by 3, and includes kind of a lunch and cooking mushrooms, and like some good mushroom soup and all that.
Yeah, and you don't need to be an expert. So from everyone who
No, no, you just need to have an open mind and a
no mind a good
curiosity.
pair of shoes.
Yeah,
Brilliant. Well, look, Bill, I think it's really good to leave it there. Again, I think people can find you. The best place was probably mushroomstuff.com, or mushroom stuff on Facebook. You'll find Bill there.
yeah.
Mushroom.
Our at mushroom stuff on Twitter also, and mushroom stuff on Facebook, and we help people with identification on all of those mediums as well. So
Yeah,
by just tweeting us a photograph or putting a photograph up on Facebook, we can often give you an indication as to what the mushroom might be.
brilliant. Yeah, and anyone on Instagram can find you at mushroomstuff_. So there's just an underscore after mushroom stuff. But if you type mushroom stuff into the search bar,
Yeah,
you'll find him
yeah.
there. And everything that we've talked about will be in the show notes. And it was brilliant. Is there anything else you'd like to leave people with, Bill, or
No, just I mean, get out there, and I think when you begin to understand, I mean, some of the things we touched on today about fungi, you realize how wonderful the nature is, and
yeah,
how we need to appreciate it and protect it, and observe it and be part of it, as opposed to trying to dominate and control it. And I think when people have that appreciation, it helps us. We've just come through a stressful year, but I think when you understand nature and the beauty and complexity of it, that's something that helps us all mentally, and can be very reassuring for people. I think is knowledge that should be essential.
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it. Till next time. I'm sure we'll do this again, and hopefully next time it's actually in person at a mushroom hunt.
Yeah,
I really can't say how much I'm looking forward to those.
I,
So
I'm looking forward to it, Matthew.
thanks, Emil.
You're very welcome.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Visit gogatherwild.com to see notes on what we discussed today, and connect with us on social media at GoGatherWild. Thanks for listening. Happy foraging.